If someone you trusted with your life suddenly called you at 12:30 in the morning and whispered, "Dad," don't ask questions. Turn off every light. Lock every door. Hide in the basement. Right now. Would you obey? I did. And 30 minutes later, through the tiny basement window, I watched my own daughter unlock the front door for three strangers carrying black duffel bags. That was the exact moment I realized. The greatest danger wasn't outside my home. It had been sleeping under my roof for nearly a year. Before I tell you what happened, subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments what time it is where you're watching from. My name is Harold Whitmore. I'm 69 years old and spent 42 years working as a structural engineer in Savannah, Georgia. Most people think engineers spend their lives drawing blueprints. Not me. I spent my career investigating why buildings collapsed. Every cracked foundation, every failed bridge, every sinking apartment complex had one thing in common. The damage always started somewhere small. A tiny crack, a loose bolt, a flaw nobody wanted to notice. I should have remembered that lesson when my own family started changing. Instead, I ignored every warning sign. My wife, Eleanor, passed away 5 years ago after battling pancreatic cancer. Losing her nearly broke me. For almost 45 years, we'd shared breakfast every morning at the exact same oak table. Same seats, same coffee mugs, same newspaper. When she was gone, the silence became unbearable. Our children tried to help. My oldest son, Michael, lived in Washington, D.C. He worked for the FBI. He never talked much about his cases, only that he specialized in organized financial crime. Whenever I asked what exactly that meant, he'd smile and say, "Dad, the less you know, the safer you are." My younger daughter, Emily, she was 38. Growing up, she was the sweetest child anyone could ask for. Every Father's Day, she'd draw me little blueprints of impossible houses because she wanted to be an engineer just like Daddy. I still kept those drawings in my desk. She had married Ryan Collins 18 months before everything happened. Ryan introduced himself as a logistics consultant. Smooth voice, expensive suits, perfect smile. The type of man who never seemed nervous. At first, I liked him. Everyone did. He remembered birthdays, held doors open, brought flowers whenever he visited. He always knew exactly what to say. Looking back, that should have worried me. People who never make mistakes usually spend their lives hiding something. One Sunday afternoon, Emily came over carrying homemade lasagna. She looked exhausted. "Dad," she said quietly, "Ryan lost another contract." I frowned. I thought business was good. It usually is. She forced a smile. "It's just temporary." Ryan joined us on the porch a few minutes later. He laughed like nothing was wrong. "Harold, I hate asking this. You know I wouldn't if there were another option." I nodded. "What do you need?" He looked embarrassed. "Our apartment lease ends next month." Emily reached for my hand. "Could we stay here for a little while? Just until Ryan gets another project." I looked around my empty house. 3 bedrooms sat unused. The guest room still smelled like fresh paint because Eleanor had insisted on redecorating it before she got sick. It seemed foolish to leave the place empty while my daughter struggled. Of course. Emily hugged me so tightly I almost couldn't breathe. Ryan smiled. "You won't regret this." Those were the last honest words I ever heard him speak. The first month felt normal. Ryan fixed a leaking faucet, mowed the lawn, cooked dinner twice a week, even accompanied me to my cardiologist appointment. "You're lucky," my doctor joked. "Most sons-in-law disappear after the wedding." Ryan laughed. "Harold's family. I take care of family." Funny thing about lies. The really dangerous ones sound exactly like the truth. Slowly, things began changing. Ryan suggested installing smart locks. For security. Then cameras, so we can monitor deliveries. Then motion sensors. Crime's getting worse. Every upgrade sounded reasonable, until one afternoon I realized something strange. There were cameras covering every hallway, every entrance, the garage, the kitchen, even my backyard. But none, not one, pointed toward Ryan and Emily's bedroom. I asked about it. Ryan chuckled. Privacy. I nodded. Made sense, didn't it? Maybe, maybe not. Then my weekly fishing trip stopped. Ryan always had an excuse. The weather looks bad. You seem tired. You should rest. Soon, my old friends quit calling. Apparently, they'd been told I wasn't feeling well. One afternoon, my neighbor, Frank, stopped me while I checked the mailbox. Harold, I heard your memory's getting worse. I blinked. What? Frank looked uncomfortable. Ryan mentioned you've been forgetting things. I laughed. The only thing I've forgotten is why people gossip. Frank smiled awkwardly, but his eyes said something else. Pity. That bothered me, because pity spreads faster than truth. Michael called every Sunday evening. At least, he used to. Then one weekend I noticed my phone hadn't rung. Monday morning I asked Emily, "Did Michael call yesterday?" She looked surprised. No. Later that afternoon, I found my phone charging in the kitchen. 6 missed calls, all from Michael. None had rung. Ryan walked in carrying groceries. Oh, he said casually, your phone kept vibrating while you were asleep. I silenced it. I stared at him. You answered. I didn't want the ringing waking you. Then he smiled. I told Michael you'd call him later. Something inside me tightened. Not fear. Recognition. It was the same feeling I'd gotten years earlier while inspecting a parking garage moments before discovering hidden structural damage. Everything looked fine, but it wasn't. The foundation had already begun cracking. I started paying attention. Real attention. Ryan made more private phone calls than anyone I'd ever known. Always outside. Always after dark. Always speaking softly. Sometimes I'd catch pieces. Shipment. Documents. Tuesday night. When I asked about work, he'd grin. Boring business stuff. One evening I noticed Emily crying quietly on the back porch. I sat beside her. Everything all right? She wiped her face quickly. I'm fine. You don't look fine. It's just stress. Money. She hesitated, then nodded. Ryan appeared through the sliding glass door. There you two are. He wrapped an arm around Emily's shoulders before she could answer another question. Dinner's ready. She stood immediately, never looking back. 3 weeks later, my phone rang. 12:34 a.m. Michael. I answered immediately. His breathing was heavy. Dad. His voice was barely above a whisper. Listen carefully. My heart skipped. Michael. Lock every door. Turn off every light. And whatever happens. His voice became even quieter. Hide in the basement. Right now. I sat upright in bed. What happened? I can't explain. There's no time. Then came the sentence that changed everything. And Dad. Don't tell Ryan I called. I couldn't move. The phone trembled in my hand. Michael, what is this about? I promise I'll explain later. But if you trust me, go. Now. The line went dead. I stared at the black screen. My son wasn't the type to panic. In 38 years, I'd never heard fear in his voice. Tonight, I had. I quietly slipped out of bed. The hallway was dark. Ryan and Emily's bedroom door was closed. No sound. No movement. I resisted the urge to knock. Instead, I followed Michael's instructions exactly. I locked the front door, then the back, then the garage entrance. Every window, every latch. One by one, I switched off every light until the house disappeared into darkness. Only the faint glow of the moon leaked through the curtains. The basement stairs groaned beneath my weight. I froze after every creak. Listening. Nothing. At the bottom sat my old woodworking shop. After retiring, I turned half the basement into a workshop where I restored antique furniture. Old oak rocking chairs, Victorian desks, handmade cabinets. What had always made sense to me, unlike people, would never lied. I switched off the small work lamp. The basement became pitch black. Only one tiny window near the ceiling overlooked the driveway. I dragged an old chair beneath it and waited. Minutes crawled by. The grandfather clock upstairs struck 1. Still, nothing. Maybe Michael had made a mistake. Maybe the danger had already passed. I almost stood up. Then, I heard footsteps. Not outside. Inside. Above me. Slow. Careful. Someone was walking through the living room. I held my breath. A floorboard creaked. Then Ryan's voice floated through the ceiling. So far, so good. A pause. Then another sentence. He's asleep. Another pause. No. He hasn't noticed anything. My heartbeat quickened. Who was he talking to? Ryan continued. Come in through the front. No headlights. 3 minutes. He ended the call. My stomach tightened. 3 minutes? For what? I pressed myself against the basement wall. Outside, the neighborhood remained silent. Then, a pair of black SUVs rolled slowly down my street. Neither had their headlights on. They stopped directly across from my house. 4 people climbed out, all dressed in dark jackets. Caps pulled low. No one spoke. They moved with practiced precision. Ryan opened the front door before they even reached it. Like he'd been waiting. He shook hands with one of them. No hugs. No smiles. Just business. Then all 5 disappeared inside. I wanted to believe there had to be another explanation. Maybe business partners. Maybe friends. But why arrive after 1 in the morning? Why without headlights? Why tell Michael to hide? My answer came seconds later. Through the floor, I heard furniture moving. Heavy furniture. Then metal scraping. I knew that sound. My safe. The old steel safe behind the bookshelf in my study. Only 3 people knew the combination. Me, Emily, and Ryan. 2 years earlier, Emily had insisted. Dad, what if you have a medical emergency? We should know where your important papers are. She'd sounded so concerned. So loving. I told her. Now, I wished I hadn't. I heard the safe door swing open. Metal against metal. Then paper rustling. Drawers opening. Someone laughed. Another voice said, everything's here. A deeper voice answered, take the originals. Leave the copies. My blood ran cold. Originals? The deed to my house. Land records. Insurance files. Property surveys. Engineering certifications. Birth certificates. Every legal document I'd spent decades protecting. I wanted to storm upstairs. Throw them out. Call the police. But Michael had told me to hide. There had to be a reason. I stayed still. The hardest thing I'd ever done. 20 minutes passed. Then footsteps returned. This time, they came toward the basement door. My chest tightened. The doorknob turned. Slowly. Once. Twice. The basement door creaked open. Someone started descending the stairs. Each step echoed like thunder. 1, 2, 3. I slid behind my old table saw, barely breathing. The footsteps stopped halfway down. A flashlight beam swept across the room. It passed over my workbench, my shelves, my tools. Then, toward the chair beneath the window. I closed my eyes. The light paused. For what felt like forever. Finally, the footsteps retreated. The basement door closed again. I didn't move. Not for another 15 minutes. When the front door finally opened again, I climbed back to the tiny window. The strangers walked outside carrying 2 black duffel bags. Ryan handed one man a thick manila envelope. The man counted something inside, then handed Ryan a smaller white envelope. Money. No doubt about it. Emily stood in the doorway. She wasn't crying. She wasn't arguing. She wasn't confused. She simply watched. Calmly. As if this was completely normal. One of the men nodded to her. She nodded back. Then they all drove away. The street fell silent again. I remained frozen until dawn. The sunrise usually brought peace. That morning, It only brought answers I never wanted. Around 6:30, I heard coffee brewing upstairs. Cabinet doors opening. The television switched on. Morning news. Ryan laughed at something the anchor said, as though nothing unusual had happened, as though 5 strangers hadn't emptied my safe a few hours earlier. I slowly climbed the basement stairs. Every step felt heavier than the last. When I entered my study, the bookshelf looked untouched. The safe door stood closed. Whoever had been here knew exactly how to leave no obvious signs. I entered the combination. The heavy door clicked open. Inside, everything looked normal, until I looked closer. The original deed to my house. Gone. Original survey maps. Gone. My late wife's handwritten trust documents. Gone. Several notarized land records. Gone. Only photocopies remained. Someone had carefully replaced every original with duplicates. It was so precise. I almost admired the planning. Almost. Dad. Emily's voice came from behind me. I turned slowly. She stood in the doorway holding 2 coffee mugs. You've been up early. I couldn't sleep. She smiled gently. Bad dreams. If only she knew. No. Just thinking. Ryan appeared behind her. Morning, Harold. He looked exactly the same. Perfect hair. Perfect smile. Perfect liar. You all right? I looked directly into his eyes. For one brief second, I thought he knew. Then he smiled wider. Breakfast. I forced myself to nod. Sure. As we sat around the kitchen table, Ryan joked about football. Emily talked about grocery shopping. The morning news played quietly in the background. Neither of them showed the slightest hint of guilt. I realized something terrifying. These weren't amateurs. They'd done this before. Many times. I finished my coffee, excused myself, locked my bedroom door, then picked up my phone. I dialed Michael. He answered before the first ring finished. Dad. His voice was calmer now. You listened? Yes. There were 5 of them. They emptied my safe. Silence. Then, Michael quietly said, I was afraid of that. I gripped the phone tighter. Michael, tell me the truth. What have Emily and Ryan gotten themselves into? Another long silence. When he finally answered, his words made my blood freeze. Dad, this isn't just about your house anymore. Ryan Collins is part of one of the largest property fraud organizations we've investigated in 5 years. And I think you were their next victim. I leaned against the bedroom wall. My legs suddenly felt too weak to hold me. What do you mean? I whispered. Their next victim? Michael lowered his voice. Dad, everything I'm about to tell you stays between us. Not Emily. Not Ryan. Not anyone. I understand. He took a slow breath. For the last 11 months, the FBI has been investigating a criminal organization that steals commercial and residential properties. I thought that only happened in movies. I wish it did. They target older homeowners, people living alone, widows, retirees, anyone with significant property and few people checking on them. A chill crawled up my spine. Like me. Exactly. I sank onto the edge of the bed. They don't steal houses overnight, Michael continued. They do it slowly. First, they isolate the owner. Then they convince neighbors and friends that the victim is becoming forgetful. They gain access to important documents. Eventually, they file forged paperwork. Sometimes fake powers of attorney. Sometimes fraudulent trusts. Sometimes guardianship petitions. They legally become the owner's representative before the victim even realizes what's happening. I closed my eyes. Every strange thing Ryan had done suddenly made perfect sense. The cameras, the smart locks, answering my phone, telling neighbors my memory was fading. It hadn't been random. It had been preparation. Michael continued. We've identified 14 victims so far. 3 lost their homes. 1 died before realizing what happened. My throat tightened. Ryan's involved in all of this. Yes. Unfortunately. We can't arrest him yet. Why not? Because we still don't know who's running the organization. We only have pieces. If Ryan disappears now, the people above him vanish too. I rubbed my forehead. So what do I do? His answer came immediately. Nothing. What? Act normal. Smile. Eat breakfast. Let Ryan believe he still controls everything. And meanwhile, we gather evidence. I look toward the bedroom door. I don't know if I can do that. You can. I've seen you solve structural failures that nobody else could. This is the same thing. Find the weak points. His words reminded me of something I'd told dozens of young engineers. Buildings don't collapse because of one mistake. They collapse because hundreds of small mistakes go unnoticed. Maybe people work the same way. I'll do it. One more thing. If Ryan ever suspects you know anything, call me immediately. The line disconnected. The rest of that day, I became someone else. I smiled. I laughed at Ryan's jokes. I complimented Emily's cooking. Inside, I watched. Really watched. Ryan checked his phone constantly. Not casually. Methodically. Every 20 or 30 minutes. Whenever it buzzed, he stepped outside. Always. Never inside the house. Never in front of Emily. That surprised me. Even she wasn't trusted. Late that afternoon, Ryan announced he was going to the hardware store. I'll only be gone 20 minutes. The moment his SUV disappeared down the street, I moved. Not toward my study, toward the guest bedroom. Ryan had insisted on using it as his home office. The door wasn't locked. Inside, everything looked perfectly ordinary. Computer, printer, bookshelf, family photos. Too ordinary. People hiding secrets often try too hard to appear normal. I started with the desk. Pens. Invoices. Nothing. Then the filing cabinet. Utility bills. Insurance papers. Receipts. Again. Nothing. I almost gave up. Then I noticed something strange. The bookshelf sat almost 2 inches away from the wall. Farther than necessary. I carefully slid it aside. Behind it was a small wall safe. My pulse quickened. Of course, Ryan carried keys. Not combinations. One of them had to fit. I searched the desk drawers again. 3 keyrings. House keys. Car keys. 1 tiny brass key. I tried it. Click. The safe opened. Inside were 6 folders. No cash. No jewelry. Just documents. I opened the first one. Property records. Addresses. Photographs. Each file belonged to a different elderly homeowner. Every folder contained handwritten notes. Lives alone. Heart condition. Children live out of state. Neighbor visits twice weekly. My stomach twisted. They weren't stealing houses. They were hunting people. Like predators tracking prey. I opened another folder. A smiling couple in their 70s. Their home marked with red ink. Across the front page, someone had written, completed. Another file. Pending. Another. High value. Then, I found mine. My own photograph. Taken from across the street. I was standing on my porch watering flowers. Someone had been watching me long before Ryan met Emily. Beneath the photo, typed neatly, Harold Whitmore. Age, 69. Widower. Estimated property value, $1.9 million. Investment portfolio, moderate. Primary obstacle, son, federal employment. I stopped breathing. They knew about Michael. Every page after that became worse. Schedules, medical appointments, bank names, insurance policies, even notes about my daily routine. Walks every morning at 7:15. Usually asleep before 10 p.m. Trusts daughter completely. At the bottom of the page, one sentence had been circled. Target ready for Phase 3. I had no idea what Phase 3 meant, but I knew enough. I quickly photographed every single page with my phone. Dozens of pictures. Then, I heard tires outside. Ryan. Back already. I shoved everything back exactly as I'd found it. Closed the safe. Locked it. Moved the bookshelf. Returned the key. Closed the drawer. Just as I stepped into the hallway, the front door opened. "Harold," Ryan called cheerfully. "You home?" I forced a smile. "Right here." He carried 2 bags from the hardware store. "You wouldn't believe the traffic." I looked him straight in the eyes. "I believe you." He smiled. For the first time, his smile didn't reach his eyes. He studied me for nearly 3 seconds, long enough to make me wonder. Did he know? That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps again. Not Ryan's. Emily's. I quietly cracked my bedroom door. She walked downstairs carrying her phone. She thought everyone was asleep. She entered the kitchen. A moment later, I heard her whisper, "No, he doesn't suspect anything." A pause. Then, "I checked the safe this morning. Everything looked normal." Another pause. She looked toward the hallway. I stepped back before she could see me. My heart pounded. Emily wasn't just helping Ryan. She was reporting to someone else. Someone above Ryan. The next morning, I sat on the porch drinking coffee, trying to look relaxed. A black pickup truck slowed as it passed my house. The driver looked directly at me. Didn't wave. Didn't smile. Just looked. Then drove away. 10 minutes later, the same truck passed again. This time, it didn't slow down. I memorized the license plate. An hour later, another unfamiliar car stopped across the street. A man pretending to read a newspaper remained parked for almost 20 minutes, then left. I suddenly realized something terrifying. I wasn't the only one watching. They were watching me too. And if Michael was right, the game had already entered. Phase 3. I didn't tell Michael about the black pickup over the phone. Not because I didn't trust him, because I suddenly wasn't sure who might be listening. If Ryan had filled my house with cameras, who was to say he hadn't done something with the phones too? Instead, I drove to the public library. It was the one place Ryan never questioned. He thought I went there to read engineering magazines. In reality, I was looking for a computer no one could trace back to my house. I logged into a temporary email account Michael had helped me create years earlier. We joked about it then. "Dad, someday you'll actually learn cybersecurity. Only if you teach an old man," I'd laughed. Now, that forgotten lesson might save my life. I uploaded every photograph I'd taken from Ryan's hidden safe. 43 images. Every file. Every victim. Every note. Before pressing send, I typed only 4 words. "Found these. Be careful." Then I clicked send. 30 seconds later, my phone vibrated. One message. From Michael. "Leave the library immediately." No explanation. No greeting. Just those 4 words. I walked outside. The afternoon sun reflected off parked cars. Everything looked perfectly ordinary, until I noticed the same black pickup, parked half a block away. The driver wore sunglasses. He wasn't reading. He wasn't using his phone. He was watching the library entrance. Watching me. I pretended not to notice. Instead of walking directly to my truck, I crossed the street toward a small bakery. The pickup didn't move. Good. He expected me to drive home. Instead, I exited through the bakery's rear door into an alley. A city bus stopped at the corner. I climbed aboard just before the doors closed. From the back window, I watched the pickup pull into traffic. It continued toward the library parking lot. The driver had lost me. For now. That evening, Ryan acted unusually cheerful. He grilled steaks, opened an expensive bottle of wine, even suggested we play cards after dinner. It felt forced, like he was putting on a performance. Halfway through the meal, he looked directly at me. "So, Harold, you were at the library today?" I nearly dropped my fork. "Yes." He smiled. "Read anything interesting?" "An article about bridge failures." Ryan laughed. "You and your engineering." Emily smiled politely, but something about her expression bothered me. She looked nervous. Not guilty. Afraid. Ryan leaned back. "You know, I've been thinking. Maybe it's time we updated your estate planning. I kept chewing. My estate planning? Sure. You've got a beautiful property. Investments. Insurance. It's responsible. Emily immediately added. We're only thinking about your future. There it was again. Concern disguised as kindness. I smiled. I've already taken care of it. Ryan's smile froze. What do you mean? I met with my attorney last month. Complete lie. But I wanted to see his reaction. For the first time, his mask slipped. Only for a second. His eyes widened. Then, the smile returned. Oh, I didn't know that. You never asked. Silence settled over the table. Nobody touched their food. That night, my bedroom door creaked open. I pretended to be asleep. Soft footsteps entered. Someone stood beside my bed, watching me. I slowed my breathing. The figure remained there for nearly a full minute. Then, a hand reached toward my nightstand. My phone disappeared. The footsteps quietly retreated. The door closed. I waited. 30 seconds. 1 minute. 2. Only then did I get up. My phone was gone. Ryan. He wanted to know who I'd been talking to. The next morning, he casually handed it back. You left this downstairs. I looked at him. No. I was pretty sure it stayed beside my bed. He shrugged. Maybe you carried it while you were sleepwalking. Sleepwalking? I'd never sleepwalked a day in my life. He was testing me, trying to see if I'd accuse him. Instead, I smiled. Guess I'm getting old. He nodded slowly. Maybe. At noon, someone knocked on the front door. A delivery driver. Package for Mr. Whitmore. I hadn't ordered anything. Inside the box was a beautifully carved wooden jewelry case. No sender. No note. Just one object. I opened it. Empty. Except for a single brass key. Ryan appeared behind me. Interesting gift. I looked confused. No idea who sent it. Neither of us touched the key again. But I noticed something. Ryan looked genuinely surprised. He hadn't sent it, which meant someone else knew where I lived. Someone else wanted me to have that key. That evening, Michael finally called. His voice was different. Urgent. Dad, you need to leave the house. I stood up immediately. What happened? The files you sent. They changed everything. We identified 27 victims. 7 properties already stolen. But that's not the biggest problem. What is? Michael hesitated. The man running this organization isn't Ryan. I figured that. No, you don't understand. Ryan doesn't even know who the real boss is. My heart sank. So who is? We don't know. But whoever he is, he's been watching your house for months. I glanced toward the living room window. Outside, the black pickup had returned. Parked across the street. Engine running. Michael continued. Dad, we intercepted a message 2 hours ago. It mentioned Phase 4. I remembered the file. Target ready for Phase 3. What happens in Phase 4? Silence. Then Michael answered. His voice barely above a whisper. They make the homeowner disappear. Every muscle in my body froze. Disappear. Not evicted. Not manipulated. Disappear. I looked across the street. The driver of the pickup was no longer inside. The truck sat empty. My front porch suddenly creaked. Someone was climbing the steps. A slow, deliberate knock echoed through the house. 3 knocks. Then silence. Ryan looked up from the living room. I'll get it. No, I said quickly. I've got it. We both started walking toward the front door. At exactly the same time. For a brief second, Ryan and I stood frozen. Neither of us spoke. The knocking came again. 3 slow knocks. Not loud. Not impatient. Whoever stood outside knew exactly what they were doing. Ryan forced a smile. I'll get it. I shook my head. It's my house. His jaw tightened for only an instant before he stepped aside. Of course. I unlocked the deadbolt. Opened the door. Standing on my porch was a man in his early 70s. Gray beard. Navy baseball cap. Khaki jacket. He looked like any retired grandfather. But his eyes were constantly moving, checking windows, checking the street, checking Ryan standing behind me. Mr. Harold Whitmore? Yes. The man smiled politely. My name is Walter Gaines. I think I used to own something that belongs to you. I frowned. I'm sorry. He glanced past me toward Ryan, then looked back into my eyes. I restored antique furniture years ago. I heard you do the same. The sentence sounded ordinary, but the way he emphasized restore, it felt rehearsed. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a folded receipt. I believe this belongs to you. He placed it in my hand, then quietly added, read it. Alone, without another word. He turned around, walked to an old pickup truck. Not the black one, a rusty Ford. 30 seconds later, he disappeared down the street. Ryan frowned. Friend of yours? I don't think so. Emily walked over. What did he want? No idea. I slipped the folded receipt into my shirt pocket. I waited until everyone was asleep, then locked myself inside my workshop. The folded receipt wasn't a receipt at all. It was a handwritten note. Only 2 sentences. Don't trust anyone inside the house. The brass key opens box 214. Union Security Storage. No signature. Nothing else. I stared at the note for nearly a minute. The brass key. The mysterious package. Someone was trying to help me. But why? The next morning, I told Ryan I had a dentist appointment. He offered to drive. No need. I'll be fine. He insisted. It's on my way. No. I smiled. I enjoy driving. For the first time, he argued. You're getting older, Harold. Traffic downtown is dangerous. I said, I'll drive myself. Silence. Then he smiled again. Suit yourself. As I backed my truck out of the driveway, I checked the mirror. Exactly 30 seconds later, the black pickup pulled away from the opposite curb, following me. Instead of heading downtown, I drove through 3 neighborhoods, made 4 unnecessary turns, entered a shopping center, exited through another road. The pickup remained behind me. Not close. Never close. Professional. I finally reached Union Security Storage on the edge of Savannah. A faded brick building. Rows of climate-controlled lockers. An elderly receptionist looked up. Can I help you? I placed the brass key on the counter. I think someone left something for me. She examined the number. Box 214. Without asking for identification, she nodded. They told us you'd eventually come. My heart skipped. They? The woman smiled apologetically. I don't know their names. They paid 5 years in advance. 5 years. Someone had planned this long before Ryan entered my life. She led me down a narrow hallway, stopped at a small steel locker. The brass key turned easily. Inside sat a single waterproof document case. Nothing more. I carried it to a private table, opened it. The first thing I saw was a photograph. Ryan, standing beside another man. A tall man wearing an expensive charcoal suit. His face was turned slightly away from the camera. You couldn't identify him completely, but Ryan clearly could. The second item, a flash drive. The third, a handwritten journal. The name written on the inside cover made my heart stop. Richard Whitmore, my younger brother. Richard had died 12 years ago, or so I believed. My hands began trembling. I opened the first page. Harold, if you're reading this, they finally came for your house. I couldn't breathe. My brother had known. Years ago. How? I flipped through more pages. Richard described people approaching him with investment opportunities, real estate partnerships, property transfers. Everything sounded disturbingly familiar. Then I reached an entry dated 11 years earlier. I discovered they're not buying houses. They're building identities. If anything happens to me, never trust anyone who suddenly becomes too helpful. A cold shiver ran through my body. Richard hadn't died in a boating accident. He'd been murdered. or made to disappear. I looked back at the photograph. The suited man. Could he be the same person? The one running the organization? My phone vibrated. Michael. Dad. Where are you? I found something. I know. What? The flash drive. My eyes widened. How did you know about it? Because. Michael hesitated. We've been trying to find that drive for 6 years. What is it? If it's the drive we think it is. It contains the organization's financial records. The entire operation. I looked toward the storage office entrance. Someone walked inside. A man wearing sunglasses. He wasn't carrying a storage box. He wasn't speaking to anyone. He simply stood there, looking down the hallway. Looking toward me. Michael's voice sharpened. Dad, what's wrong? I think I've been followed. Listen carefully. Don't leave through the front. I'm sending local agents. They're 15 minutes away. I looked again. The man in sunglasses had disappeared. Gone. As though he'd never been there. I hurried back to the reception desk. The rear exit? The receptionist pointed toward an emergency door. That way. I stepped outside into bright sunlight. The parking lot behind the building was empty, except for the black pickup, parked directly behind my truck. Engine idling. Driver unseen. Someone slowly opened the passenger door and stepped out. When I recognized the face, every drop of blood seemed to leave my body. It wasn't Ryan. It wasn't anyone from the house. It was Walter Gaines, the old man who had given me the note. He looked directly at me and shouted, "Get in your truck." Then he pulled a pistol from beneath his jacket and aimed it, not at me, but at someone standing behind me. Walter's voice echoed across the parking lot. "Get down." Instinct took over. I dropped beside my truck just as a gunshot shattered the afternoon silence. Crack. The bullet slammed into the windshield behind me, exploding the glass into thousands of sparkling fragments. For a heartbeat, everything became chaos. People screamed inside the storage office. A woman dropped a stack of boxes. Car alarms erupted all over the parking lot. Walter fired twice. Bang. Bang. Not wildly. Precisely. The man behind me ducked behind a silver sedan and disappeared from view. Walter grabbed my arm. Move. We ran between 2 rows of parked vehicles. My lungs burned. At 69, I wasn't built for sprinting anymore. Walter pushed me behind a delivery van. You all right? I think so. He peeked around the corner. They're leaving. A black SUV sped out of the parking lot, tires squealing. The black pickup followed seconds later. Within moments, they were gone. Sirens echoed in the distance. Walter finally lowered his pistol. His breathing remained calm. Far too calm for an ordinary retiree. I stared at him. Who are you? He looked at me for a long moment, then slowly reached into his jacket. Instead of another weapon, he pulled out a leather badge wallet. Inside was a tarnished gold badge. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Retired Special Agent. Walter Gaines. You? I retired 8 years ago, he said. But I never stopped chasing these people. Within minutes, 2 FBI SUVs surrounded the storage facility. Michael climbed out of the first vehicle before it had fully stopped. He crossed the parking lot in seconds. Then, for the first time since he was a little boy, he hugged me. Hard. You okay? I've had better afternoons. He laughed nervously. I was afraid I'd gotten here too late. Walter walked toward us. Michael nodded respectfully. Good to see you again. Walter smiled. You've grown into a decent agent. So you've been working together? I asked. Michael nodded. For almost 3 years. I looked from one to the other. Why didn't anyone tell me? Walter answered quietly. Because the fewer people who knew, the longer you stayed alive. Inside the FBI's temporary command vehicle, technicians immediately connected the flash drive. Dozens of encrypted folders appeared. One young analyst's eyes widened. My God. What? Michael leaned over his shoulder. The analyst swallowed. It's all here. Every transaction. Every shell company. Every forged deed. Walter folded his arms. The ledger. The analyst nodded. $23 million. 42 stolen properties. 17 fake identities. Michael looked at me. Dad, you didn't just save your own house. You may have just destroyed the entire organization. Before I could respond, another analyst called out, Sir, you need to see this. Everyone gathered around. The analyst opened a folder labeled Director. Inside were photographs. Some showed luxury homes. Others showed meetings. Then, one image filled the screen. Ryan, standing beside the same man from the photograph in the storage locker. This time, his face wasn't hidden. The room fell silent. Michael whispered, I know him. Walter looked shocked. No, that's impossible. I stared at the photograph. The man wore an expensive navy suit. Silver hair. Perfect smile. He looked more like a respected businessman than a criminal. Who is he? Michael didn't answer immediately. Finally he spoke. His name is Charles Mercer. He owns Mercer Senior Living Communities. I frowned. The retirement homes? Michael nodded slowly. He also runs financial planning seminars for senior citizens. Walter slammed his fist onto the table. So that's how he finds them. The realization spread through the room. Mercer wasn't searching for victims. They were coming directly to him, trusting him, listening to him, giving him everything he needed. An hour later, I finally opened Richard's journal again. This time, Walter sat beside me. I knew your brother, he said quietly. I looked up. You did? Walter nodded. He came to us. Tried warning us. What happened? Walter sighed. We couldn't prove anything. Before we could build a case, Richard disappeared. They told us he'd drowned. Walter looked away. I never believed it. I turned another page. Near the end of the journal, Richard had written something in hurried handwriting. If Mercer ever realizes I've copied the ledger, he'll kill me. I've hidden the copy somewhere no one would think to look. Walter leaned closer. The flash drive. He actually did it. I continued reading. Harold, if you're reading this, don't blame yourself. They chose our family because of grandfather's land. I stopped. Grandfather's land? I looked at Walter. What does that mean? Walter rubbed his forehead. Your grandfather owned nearly 2,000 acres outside Savannah. I know. He sold most of it decades ago. Walter nodded. But not all of it. I frowned. What are you saying? Michael answered. The land beneath your house is now worth nearly $40 million. Silence. 40 million? I laughed in disbelief. You're joking. I wish I were. Michael slid a map across the table. A new interstate project. Commercial development. Industrial zoning. Every expansion surrounded my neighborhood. My modest old house sat directly in the center. Ryan hadn't married Emily because he loved her. He hadn't moved into my home because he needed a place to stay. He hadn't spent 2 years earning my trust out of kindness. He'd been sent to acquire the one property standing in the way of a fortune. Everything suddenly fit together. Every lie, every smile, every carefully planned conversation. Michael's phone rang. He answered. His expression immediately changed. What? When? He looked at Walter. They're moving. Walter stood. Mercer. Michael nodded. Private airfield. 35 minutes. Walter grabbed his jacket. If he leaves the country, we lose him. Michael turned toward me. Dad, I need you to stay here. Before I could answer, another agent rushed inside. Sir, what now? The agent looked directly at me. Ryan Collins just left Mr. Whitmore's house. Emily's with him. They're heading east. Michael frowned. Toward the airfield? The agent checked his tablet. Yes. Walter muttered under his breath. They're going to Mercer. I looked at my son. No. Michael blinked. What? They're not running. I remembered Ryan's smile that morning, his strange calm, the missing phone, the tests. He knows. He knows I've been working with you. The room fell silent. Then Michael slowly nodded. They're not escaping. They're going to finish the job. Walter's voice echoed across the parking lot. Get down. Instinct took over. I dropped beside my truck just as a gunshot shattered the afternoon silence. Crack. The bullet slammed into the windshield behind me, exploding the glass into thousands of sparkling fragments. For a heartbeat, everything became chaos. People screamed inside the storage office. A woman dropped a stack of boxes. Car alarms erupted all over the parking lot. Walter fired twice. Bang. Bang. Not wildly. Precisely. The man behind me ducked behind a silver sedan and disappeared from view. Walter grabbed my arm. Move. We ran between two rows of parked vehicles. My lungs burned. At 69, I wasn't built for sprinting anymore. Walter pushed me behind a delivery van. You all right? I think so. He peeked around the corner. They're leaving. A black SUV sped out of the parking lot, tires squealing. The black pickup followed seconds later. Within moments, they were gone. Sirens echoed in the distance. Walter finally lowered his pistol. His breathing remained calm. Far too calm for an ordinary retiree. I stared at him. Who are you? He looked at me for a long moment, then slowly reached into his jacket. Instead of another weapon, he pulled out a leather badge wallet. Inside was a tarnished gold badge. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Retired Special Agent. Walter Gaines. You? I retired 8 years ago, he said. But I never stopped chasing these people. Within minutes, 2 FBI SUVs surrounded the storage facility. Michael climbed out of the first vehicle before it had fully stopped. He crossed the parking lot in seconds. Then, for the first time since he was a little boy, he hugged me. Hard. You okay? I've had better afternoons. He laughed nervously. I was afraid I'd gotten here too late. Walter walked toward us. Michael nodded respectfully. Good to see you again. Walter smiled. You've grown into a decent agent. So you've been working together? I asked. Michael nodded. For almost 3 years. I looked from one to the other. Why didn't anyone tell me? Walter answered quietly. Because the fewer people who knew, the longer you stayed alive. Inside the FBI's temporary command vehicle, technicians immediately connected the flash drive. Dozens of encrypted folders appeared. One young analyst's eyes widened. My God! What? Michael leaned over his shoulder. The analyst swallowed. It's all here. Every transaction. Every shell company. Every forged deed. Walter folded his arms. The ledger. The analyst nodded. $23 million. 42 stolen properties. 17 fake identities. Michael looked at me. Dad, you didn't just save your own house. You may have just destroyed the entire organization. Before I could respond, another analyst called out. Sir, you need to see this. Everyone gathered around. The analyst opened a folder labeled Director. Inside were photographs. Some showed luxury homes. Others showed meetings. Then, one image filled the screen. Ryan, standing beside the same man from the photograph in the storage locker. This time, his face wasn't hidden. The room fell silent. Michael whispered, I know him. Walter looked shocked. No, that's impossible. I stared at the photograph. The man wore an expensive navy suit. Silver hair. Perfect smile. He looked more like a respected businessman than a criminal. Who is he? Michael didn't answer immediately. Finally he spoke. His name is Charles Mercer. He owns Mercer Senior Living Communities. I frowned. The retirement homes? Michael nodded slowly. He also runs financial planning seminars for senior citizens. Walter slammed his fist onto the table. So that's how he finds them. The realization spread through the room. Mercer wasn't searching for victims. They were coming directly to him, trusting him, listening to him, giving him everything he needed. An hour later, I finally opened Richard's journal again. This time, Walter sat beside me. "I knew your brother," he said quietly. I looked up. "You did?" Walter nodded. "He came to us. Tried warning us." "What happened?" Walter sighed. "We couldn't prove anything. Before we could build a case, Richard disappeared. They told us he'd drowned." Walter looked away. I never believed it. I turned another page. Near the end of the journal, Richard had written something in hurried handwriting. "If Mercer ever realizes I've copied the ledger, he'll kill me. I've hidden the copy somewhere no one would think to look." Walter leaned closer. "The flash drive. He actually did it." I continued reading. "Harold, if you're reading this, don't blame yourself. They chose our family because of grandfather's land." I stopped. "Grandfather's land?" I looked at Walter. "What does that mean?" Walter rubbed his forehead. "Your grandfather owned nearly 2,000 acres outside Savannah." "I know. He sold most of it decades ago." Walter nodded. "But not all of it." I frowned. "What are you saying?" Michael answered. "The land beneath your house is now worth nearly $40 million. Silence. $40 million? I laughed in disbelief. "You're joking." "I wish I were." Michael slid a map across the table. "A new interstate project. Commercial development. Industrial zoning. Every expansion surrounded my neighborhood. My modest old house sat directly in the center. Ryan hadn't married Emily because he loved her. He hadn't moved into my home because he needed a place to stay. He hadn't spent 2 years earning my trust out of kindness. He'd been sent to acquire the one property standing in the way of a fortune." Everything suddenly fit together. Every lie, every smile, every carefully planned conversation. Michael's phone rang. He answered. His expression immediately changed. "What?" "When?" He looked at Walter. "They're moving." Walter stood. "Mercer?" Michael nodded. "Private airfield. 35 minutes." Walter grabbed his jacket. "If he leaves the country, we lose him." Michael turned toward me. "Dad, I need you to stay here." Before I could answer, another agent rushed inside. "Sir." "What now?" The agent looked directly at me. "Ryan Collins just left Mr. Whitmore's house. Emily's with him. They're heading east." Michael frowned. "Toward the airfield?" The agent checked his tablet. "Yes." Walter muttered under his breath. "They're going to Mercer." I looked at my son. "No." Michael blinked. "What?" "They're not running." I remembered Ryan's smile that morning. His strange calm. The missing phone. The tests. He knows. He knows I've been working with you." The room fell silent. Then Michael slowly nodded. "They're not escaping. They're going to finish the job." For a moment, no one in the command vehicle spoke. Ryan knew. That single realization changed everything. Michael immediately turned to the operations board. "How long until the tactical team reaches Mercer Airfield?" A young agent answered. 28 minutes. Walter shook his head. "Too long." Michael looked at the live GPS map. Ryan's SUV was already speeding east. "They'll get there first." I stepped closer. "Take me with you." Michael looked up sharply. "No. They're after you." "Exactly. If Ryan believes I know where the evidence is, he'll come to me before he runs." Walter crossed his arms. "Your father's right." Michael frowned. "He's not an agent." "No," Walter replied. "But Ryan thinks like a con man. And con men always go back to unfinished business." Michael hated the idea. I could see it on his face. But after several long seconds, he slowly nodded. "Fine. But you stay behind us. No heroics." I smiled faintly. "I've survived 69 years. I think I can follow instructions." Walter chuckled. "That's not what your son is worried about." Three black SUVs raced toward the private airfield on the outskirts of Savannah. The sky had darkened with heavy storm clouds. Rain began falling in scattered drops against the windshield. Michael drove. Walter sat beside him. I remained in the back seat wearing a bulletproof vest that felt far heavier than it looked. No one talked much. Only the police radio filled the silence. Unit 3 approaching Eastern Gate. Perimeter team in position. Helicopter airborne. Every message made my heartbeat faster. Then, Michael's phone rang. The caller ID displayed one word. Emily. He answered immediately. Emily. She was crying. Real crying. Not the controlled sadness I'd seen for months. Michael, you have to help Dad. My son's voice hardened. Where are you? I don't know. Ryan took my phone. He says. She struggled to breathe. He says Dad ruined everything. Michael's knuckles turned white around the steering wheel. Emily, listen carefully. Is Ryan driving? Yes. Can you see any signs? She looked around. I see airplanes. And a white hangar. Michael glanced at Walter. She's already at Mercer Airfield. Ryan suddenly grabbed the phone. His calm voice filled the car speakers. Special Agent Whitmore. Michael remained silent. Ryan laughed softly. I underestimated your father. He was smarter than I expected. What do you want? Ryan answered without hesitation. The flash drive. Michael said nothing. Ryan continued. If I don't have it in 20 minutes, Emily dies. The line went dead. The SUV exploded with tension. Michael slammed his fist against the steering wheel. He won't hurt her. Walter looked grim. You don't know Mercer. No. But I know Ryan. He needs leverage. Walter quietly replied. Until he doesn't. No one argued after that. 15 minutes later, the convoy reached the private airfield. It looked abandoned. One long runway. Two aging hangars. A small executive jet waited with its engines already running. Rain poured steadily now. Agents surrounded the property from 3 directions. Michael pointed toward the largest hangar. Movement. 3 black SUVs. Ryan's vehicle. Mercer's luxury sedan. Several armed guards. Walter studied them through binoculars. 8. No. 10 armed men. Michael keyed his radio. Hold positions. We wait for tactical. Before anyone could respond, I noticed something strange. Emily. She wasn't standing with Ryan. She was tied to a chair inside the hangar. My chest tightened. Ryan had lied to her too. Suddenly, the hangar doors opened wider. Charles Mercer stepped outside. Even in the rain, he looked immaculate. Tailored navy suit. Silver hair perfectly combed. Umbrella held by one of his guards. He smiled as though greeting guests at a charity dinner. Michael muttered, There he is. Mercer slowly raised a loudspeaker. Harold Whitmore. His voice echoed across the runway. I know you're here. I stepped forward before Michael could stop me. Mercer smiled wider. There you are. You've caused me a very expensive week. I stared directly at him. You murdered my brother. Mercer's expression didn't change. I didn't murder anyone. I simply removed obstacles. Walter whispered, Don't let him control the conversation. But I wasn't listening anymore. You destroyed families. Mercer shrugged. They sold me opportunities. You stole their lives. I gave them paperwork. They signed. I shook my head. They trusted you. Mercer smiled. And trust is the most valuable currency in the world. Ryan stepped beside Mercer. His expensive suit was soaked by rain. Yet he still wore that familiar smile. He looked toward me. I'm sorry it had to end this way, Harold. No. I replied quietly. You're sorry you failed. His smile disappeared. For the first time, I saw anger. Real anger. You were supposed to sign everything next month. You were supposed to believe you were losing your memory. You were supposed to move into one of Mercer's care facilities. Emily gasped. What? Ryan looked at her. You weren't supposed to hear that. She stared at him in horror. You said we were helping your investors. Ryan didn't answer. Emily's face turned pale. Then she looked toward me. Tears mixed with rain. Dad, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I swear. I didn't know. For months, I'd imagined this moment. I'd imagined screaming, blaming her, disowning her. Instead, I saw the little girl who used to draw impossible houses at my kitchen table. The girl who cried herself to sleep after her mother died. The daughter who had trusted the wrong man. I took one slow step forward. I believe you. Ryan spun toward her. You told him? Emily shook her head violently. No, you lied to me. Ryan slapped her across the face. The crack echoed across the runway. Something inside me snapped. Before anyone could stop me, I charged forward. The rain hammered the runway. For one reckless moment, I forgot my age. I forgot the guns. I forgot the FBI agents hidden around the airfield. All I could see was Ryan standing over my daughter. I charged. Ryan barely had time to turn before I slammed into him with every ounce of strength I had left. We both crashed onto the wet concrete. His pistol skidded several feet away. Move! Michael shouted into his radio. Go! 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 The quiet runway exploded into chaos. FBI agents poured from behind fuel trucks, maintenance buildings, and parked aircraft. FBI, drop your weapons. Mercer's guards reacted instantly. Gunfire erupted. The deafening cracks echoed across the empty airfield. Walter grabbed Emily's chair and dragged her behind a concrete barrier. Michael fired twice toward one of the armed guards, forcing him back behind a black SUV. Meanwhile, Ryan and I struggled in the pouring rain. He was younger, stronger, but he had one problem. He'd never worked 42 years lifting steel beams and concrete samples. I drove my shoulder into his chest. He grunted in pain. You old fool, he yelled. You ruined everything. I grabbed his jacket. No, you ruined your own life. He swung a punch that split my lip. Before he could hit me again, someone tackled him from the side. Walter, the retired FBI agent, pinned Ryan to the ground. Stay down. Ryan fought wildly. Walter twisted his arm behind his back. The handcuffs clicked shut. Ryan Collins was finished, but Charles Mercer wasn't. Using the confusion, he slipped into the executive jet. The engine screamed louder. The aircraft began rolling toward the runway. Michael looked up. No, he can't leave. The jet accelerated. Faster, faster. Walter grabbed the radio. Stop that aircraft. But the tactical vehicles were too far away. Mercer was seconds from taking off. Then, Emily spoke. Her voice was shaky. The fuel. Everyone turned. What? She pointed toward a large fuel truck parked beside the runway. He always keeps it there. Michael understood immediately. If that truck blocks the runway. He didn't finish the sentence. He sprinted. So did two other agents. Rain made the pavement slick. The jet roared closer. Its nose lifted slightly. Michael climbed into the fuel truck. The massive engine roared to life. He slammed it into gear. The truck lurched forward. Mercer saw it too late. The aircraft tried to turn. There wasn't enough room. The pilot hit the brakes. Smoke poured from the tires. The jet stopped less than 20 feet from the fuel truck. Armed FBI agents surrounded it within seconds. The cabin door opened slowly. Charles Mercer stepped outside. Hands raised. Still perfectly calm. Almost smiling. I suppose. He said quietly. This is the end. Walter walked forward. No. This is the beginning. He placed handcuffs around Mercer's wrists. For the first time, the man who had destroyed dozens of families had nowhere left to run. 3 months later, the federal courthouse in Savannah was overflowing. Journalists filled every seat. Families of the victims sat together in silence. Many of them had never known how close they'd come to losing everything. The evidence from Richard's flash drive had changed the entire case. 42 stolen properties were recovered. 31 victims had their ownership restored. More than 60 members of Mercer's organization were arrested across 4 states. The newspapers called it the largest elder property fraud case in Georgia history. Ryan Collins pleaded guilty to multiple federal charges, including conspiracy, wire fraud, identity theft, and forgery. He received a sentence of 32 years in federal prison. Charles Mercer refused every plea deal. During the trial, he never apologized. Not once. When the judge asked if he had anything to say before sentencing, Mercer slowly stood, straightened his expensive suit, and calmly replied, "I merely gave people what they wanted." The courtroom remained silent. Then Judge Eleanor Brooks leaned forward. "No, Mr. Mercer, you gave them fear. You gave them betrayal. And for the rest of your life, you'll give this country one less criminal to worry about." She sentenced him to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. For the first time, Charles Mercer's smile disappeared. "Emily, the hardest part wasn't the trial. It was rebuilding my relationship with my daughter. For weeks, she refused to look me in the eyes. She blamed herself for everything. One evening, she visited my house alone, the same front porch where she'd once asked if she and Ryan could move in. She stood there quietly. "Dad, I don't expect you to forgive me. I only wanted to tell you. I'm sorry." I looked at the little flower bed her mother had planted years before, then back at Emily. "Come sit." She looked surprised. We sat on the porch swing together, just like we had when she was 10 years old. "I keep thinking," she whispered, "if I'd paid attention, I would have seen who he really was." I nodded. "So do I." She looked at me. "You?" I was an engineer. I spent my life finding tiny cracks before buildings collapsed. But when it came to my own family, I missed every warning sign. We sat quietly for a while. Finally, I reached into my pocket, pulled out one of her childhood drawings, the impossible blue house she'd drawn when she was 8. "I kept this." She burst into tears. "So," I smiled, "how about we start building something real again?" She hugged me harder than she ever had. And for the first time since Eleanor died, our family began healing. 1 year later, the old house looked different. Fresh paint, new flowers. The security cameras were gone. The smart locks had been replaced with ordinary keys. Sometimes, simple things are the safest. Michael visited every Sunday, just like he used to. Emily came every Wednesday for dinner. She had started volunteering with organizations that helped elderly fraud victims recognize scams. She said it was her way of making things right. Walter became a close family friend. He claimed retirement suited him better the second time. I wasn't so sure. Old agents never truly retire. One afternoon, I finally visited Richard's grave. I placed a small wooden model of a bridge on the headstone. I'd built it myself. "Turns out," I said softly, "you saved me again, little brother." The wind rustled through the oak trees. For a moment, I could almost hear him laughing. People often ask me what the biggest lesson was. They expect me to say, "Never trust strangers." But that's not true. Charles Mercer wasn't a stranger. Ryan wasn't a stranger. The greatest danger isn't always the person knocking on your front door. Sometimes, it's the person you've already invited inside. Trust is one of the greatest gifts we can give another human being. But trust should never replace wisdom. And no matter how convincing someone's smile may seem, always pay attention to the small cracks. Because just like buildings, families don't collapse overnight. They collapse when warning signs are ignored. I learned that lesson almost too late. Thankfully, my son made one phone call at exactly 12:34 in the morning. One phone call that saved my life.